A millionaire CEO hadn't loved a woman in 20 years, but his new partner changed everything. The sound of Italian leather shoes echoed across the marble floor like a warning. The revolving door to the boardroom opened with calculated force, not rushed, but without hesitation. Ethan Blackwood stepped in. Silence fell instantly, as if the air had been sucked out of the room. The directors and executives shifted in their seats, a few holding their breath. "Begin." His voice sliced through the room like a blade, low, firm, leaving no room for debate. The CFO cleared his throat, trying to maintain a professional tone. "Mr. Blackwood, as you've already seen in the report, the third quarter left us with a 3.2% growth margin over the original projection." Ethan walked to the head of the table. He didn't sit. He simply observed, hands clasped behind his back, eyes the color of stormy ice. He didn't interrupt, but he didn't need to. His presence, calm, demanding, said everything. The most experienced men in the room knew he had already made his decision. The meeting was just a formality. That was how Ethan Blackwood handled everything, with precision, no time for ego. A 45-year-old man, tall, impeccable posture, custom suit, dark hair just beginning to gray at the temples. His face was stern, but never weary. And even in silence, he was heard. When the director finished his presentation, Ethan merely glanced at the screen with the charts. A pause, long enough to make one of the analysts sweat. Then he spoke. "We're losing momentum. Numbers are up, but there's no soul. No one here is seeing beyond the quarter, and if you can't see the future, you go under." Silence. No one argued with him. "The new division needs to be off the ground by the end of the semester, and I want a partnership that shakes things up. I want someone who challenges me, someone from the outside." His eyes now swept across the room one by one, as if reading minds. "Find them, and don't bring me more of the same." He turned and walked out. At the top floor of Blackwood Enterprises, the glass view offered a near-cinematic panorama of the city. But Ethan wasn't looking at the skyline. He stood by the sleek fireplace at the back of his office, arms crossed, face set. "More of the same," he murmured to himself. That's what irritated him. Predictability. The repetition of the same corporate games, the same hollow conversations, the same plastic smiles. For 20 years, he built everything from scratch, with grit, with discipline, with a drive so intense it devoured everything in its path. Friends, time, love, especially love. There was a story there, one no one brought up anymore. Her name was Helena. She was the last woman he allowed close to his soul, not just his bed. But when she left, with no warning, no note, no explanation, he stopped searching for anything that wasn't a number, a result, control. And that's how he built an empire. The soft chime of the doorbell pulled him from his thoughts. "Come in." Amanda Cho stepped inside, his executive assistant for 10 years. Petite, dark hair always in a flawless bun, sharp eyes, neutral voice, loyal like a shadow, brilliant beyond compare. He respected her deeply. "The board wants a position on the partner for the new division. We've received 3 proposals that match the briefing. The standout comes from a young company, but they've shown impressive results in clean energy and sustainable innovation. Hart and Vale." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Hart?" "Isabella Hart, founder, CEO, and technically a competitor. Age? 32. Degree in environmental engineering, MBA in strategic management. Speaker at Davos. Closed 2 international deals before she turned 30. Ambitious. And impatient with people who aren't." Amanda gave a faint smile. "Remind you of anyone?" Ethan turned toward the window. He didn't respond right away. He stood in silence for a few seconds, then said only, "Set a meeting tomorrow here." Amanda nodded and left. Alone again, Ethan took a deep breath. A woman in charge, young, ambitious, independent. This would be interesting, but he wouldn't let it be more than that. Because love, that was something he had left behind a long time ago. "You must be Mr. Blackwood." The firm, clear voice cut through the sound of wind, brushing past the tall windows of the 42nd floor. Isabella Hart extended her hand without hesitation, looking straight into the eyes of the man before her. Her fingers were slender but steady. The gesture didn't ask permission. It belonged to someone who knew exactly what she wanted. Ethan rose from the black leather armchair with deliberate slowness. He took her in. Tall golden skin, brown hair tied back in a sleek ponytail, green eyes with a spark of defiance. She wore a navy blue jumpsuit, subtle but commanding. She wasn't intimidated. That alone set her apart from most people he dealt with. He shook her hand with precise firmness. "Ethan Blackwood. Welcome to Blackwood Enterprises, Miss Hart." She gave a slight smile. "You can call me Isabella." He released her hand and gestured briefly toward the seat across from his glass desk. No small talk. "Let's get to the point." She nodded and sat down with elegance, but without pretense. The tension between them was palpable, though not the kind that threatened to snap, but the kind that sparked curiosity. Isabella presented her company's data with clarity, no need to impress. She knew her subject. She showed results, growth, innovation, and above all, vision. "My proposal is simple," she said at the end. "I'm not here for your approval. I want a real partnership. Blackwood has resources and infrastructure. Hart and Vale has agility, boldness, and ideas your people won't understand for another 5 years. Together, we can fast-track the energy transition without relying on governments, coddled investors, or market trends." She leaned back in her chair. There was no arrogance in her tone, only conviction. Ethan stayed silent for a few seconds. He looked at her like she was a chess piece that had just changed the game. Then he got up, walked over to the bar in the corner of the office, and poured himself a whiskey. "Want one?" "Not during a business pitch." She met his gaze, teasing, "Unless you're trying to throw me off." He smiled for the first time, or almost, just a faint lift at the corner of his mouth, quick, as if it had escaped his control. And would it work? Not with a glass of whiskey. She was sharp. He returned to the desk and sat down, cleared his throat before speaking. "You talk like someone who's sure she'll be chosen." "I talk like someone who doesn't have time to fake humility. You called me. I didn't chase this. And if not me, it'll be some safe, predictable name. 3 years from now, you'll wonder why your new division feels like a museum with Wi-Fi." Silence. He leaned slightly forward. "And what makes you think I wouldn't choose exactly the safe and predictable? Because you're Ethan Blackwood. And you didn't build an empire making safe choices. You built it by taking risks, defying expectations, and ignoring advice. Just like me." The words hung in the air. Ethan looked at her for a few more seconds. Then he grabbed a blank sheet of paper, scribbled something with his silver pen, and pushed it across the desk toward her. "Is this a challenge or a proposal?" she asked. "Both. You have until tomorrow to decide if you want in." She took the sheet without looking at it, slipped it into her bag, stood up. "I'll decide before the end of the day." He didn't respond, just watched as she turned and walked out with the same confidence she'd entered with. As soon as the door closed, Amanda stepped in from the side as if she'd been there for minutes. "She's different," she said flatly. Ethan simply picked up his whiskey glass, staring into the amber liquid with a distant look. "Yeah, very." Isabella stepped off the elevator with her heart pounding faster than she cared to admit. She took a deep breath before walking out of the building. The city air felt heavier. She had faced boards, politicians, nervous investors. But Ethan Blackwood was a different animal. A man who commanded every inch of the space he stood in. Masculine, controlled, strategic. Every word measured, every silence calculated. But what intrigued her most was what wasn't visible, what he kept hidden beneath that meticulous coldness. "That man doesn't feel anything," she murmured to herself. But it didn't sound like a critique. It sounded like a challenge. Deep down, she knew there was something there, something he'd buried long ago. And, without knowing why, she wanted to find out what it was. "This isn't going to work like this," Isabella said, pushing her chair back firmly. The sharp sound of the wheels on the wooden floor momentarily broke the heated discussion that had been going on for nearly 40 minutes. The meeting room for Blackwood Enterprises' new division, still under construction, was filled with panels, sketches, laptops, and overlapping voices. But none cut through clearer than hers in that moment. Ethan slowly lifted his eyes from the tablet. There were 12 people in the room, but when he looked at someone, it felt like the rest of the world disappeared. His gaze landed on her with the same precision as a knife being sharpened before the cut. "What exactly isn't going to work?" he asked, voice cold, not irritated but alert. "This structure," Isabella replied, standing up. "You want the development department reporting directly to logistics? That'll freeze the whole operation. We'll lose flexibility, agility, and ultimately, time. Time we don't have." She walked over to the whiteboard and began drawing connections with a blue marker. As she spoke, the voices around her faded. She wasn't just articulate, she was clear, persuasive. She knew how to move ideas forward. Look, if innovation has to pass through 5 layers before hitting the ground, it's not innovation. It's bureaucracy with a futuristic coating. If this division was created to be different, the structure has to be different too. Ethan didn't interrupt. He simply watched. Every word, every movement, every subtle shift in tone. When she finished, she returned to her seat without hesitation. He leaned his elbows on the table and interlaced his fingers. "So, this is criticism of the structure you helped design last week?" "No," she answered. "It's a response to what we've only seen work in theory. Now we're seeing it in practice, and we can't pretend everything's fine just to protect someone's ego." For a second, the silence in the room felt thicker than the air itself. Then, unexpectedly, Ethan leaned back in his chair. A faint smile crossed his face, not mockery, but quiet approval. "Go on." In the glass-walled room next door, now empty, only the 2 of them remained. Amanda had already left, taking the documents and adjusted diagrams with her. The team, dismissed for lunch, had left the space in silence. Isabella leaned on the table, still focused on restructuring the direct response model between departments. Ethan, standing by the window, watched the city moving below. But it wasn't the view holding his attention. It was her. "You talk like you've worked in my company for years," he said, voice low. "I observe," as she replied without looking up. "And when I observe too much, I end up talking too much." "Not a flaw," he said. He turned to her. "At least not to me." She looked up, surprised that a compliment had slipped from his mouth. But she didn't smile. She just held his gaze, steady, unflinching. "You're not the type who handles contradiction well," she noted. "And you're not the type who asks permission to contradict," he shot back. They stared at each other for a few seconds. It wasn't a game. It was mutual recognition, like 2 forces colliding, but speaking the same language. Isabella stood, picked up her folder, and began gathering the scattered papers. "So why exactly did you choose me as a partner, Ethan?" she asked without looking at him. "Because so far, it feels like we're 2 steps behind each other, waiting for the first to trip." "Because you think differently," he said, walking over to the table. "Because you're stubborn, impatient, and bold. Because no one on the board had the guts to bring up your name. And because when you walked in here that first time, you didn't try to make yourself small to fit in." She looked up. Her eyes softened just for a second. "Does that bother you?" "It reminds me I'm not dead." Silence fell. Isabella froze for a moment. Ethan didn't look away. For the first time, the tension between them wasn't strictly professional. It was something undefined, almost tangible, that both pretended not to notice. "Let's get back to work." She straightened the papers. "We still have a lot to review." "Yes," he replied without breaking eye contact. But something had changed. That night, the clock read nearly 11 when Ethan walked into his apartment. The silence was complete, broken only by the muffled sounds of the distant city. He dropped his jacket on the couch, loosened his tie, and poured himself a whiskey without thinking. He sat down in front of the unlit fireplace. Running his hands through his hair, he leaned back in the chair. There was something about that woman that unsettled him. It wasn't just attraction. He'd met beautiful, intelligent, ambitious women before. Some intrigued him for a week, others for a night. But Isabella was different. She challenged him. made him question his own convictions, walked into rooms like she owned the space, and left trails of ideas behind, provoking questions in people who thought they already had all the answers. He didn't know if he admired that, or if it made him feel vulnerable. He thought of Helena. It had been years since he remembered her so vividly. The last time he'd felt this same restlessness for someone, Helena still wore promises in her eyes, and once again he wondered, was he ready to feel something again? But Ethan Blackwood wasn't the type of man to run. If something haunted him, he faced it. If something burned him from the inside, he hardened until it stopped. But Isabella wouldn't leave his mind. She didn't just set fire, she left a mark. The next morning, Isabella walked into the new division's office with a folder in one hand and a coffee in the other. The room was quiet, the first employees just arriving. Amanda passed by her with a brief nod. Ethan was already inside. "I thought you didn't come in before 9, she said, entering without knocking. "And I thought you waited for an invitation," he replied, glancing over the top of his reading glasses. "I thought we were past that stage." She set the folder on the table. "I restructured the workflows and added a reverse org chart proposal. Might work." He took the papers and reviewed them for a few seconds. "Do you sleep?" "Less than I should. You?" "I sleep when the world goes quiet." She gave a small smile, for the first time that day, and without realizing it, they both knew this was far from just work. "Ethan, there's someone from your past in the lobby. Says she needs to speak with you. Urgently." Amanda's voice came through the intercom with its usual neutrality, but there was a subtle tension, almost imperceptible, hidden beneath the surface. Ethan froze for a moment. He was standing in front of the tactical board for the new operations center, next to Isabella discussing the upcoming tests for the clean energy system. He turned slowly. "Who is it?" "Helena Vasquez." The name dropped like lead in the room. Isabella, who had been handling prototype files, lifted her gaze. She didn't speak. She simply watched Ethan's expression shift subtly. It wasn't shock or panic. It was somewhere between restrained surprise and deep discomfort. "Send her up," he said, voice steady, almost impersonal. Isabella stayed still for a few seconds before stepping back slightly, gathering the materials. "Do you want me to give you some space?" "No. Stay." She nodded. The silence between them felt different now. He didn't explain. She didn't ask. But something had been unearthed. The glass door slid open with a faint hiss. Helena entered as if time had stood still for her. Tall, elegant, dark hair in a sharp bob, a piercing gaze, even beneath a more tired appearance. She wore a light grey dress and a long coat, carried a discreet leather bag and the weight of something that still had no name. "Ethan." He didn't respond immediately, just nodded slightly. His face was impassive, but his eyes, they had traveled back years. "Helena." She glanced at Isabella for a moment. "Can I speak to you alone?" Ethan took a deep breath, ran a hand along his jaw. His eyes rested on Isabella, who still stood firm, but silent. "She stays. If it's about me, she can hear it." Helena hesitated for a fraction of a second, then walked to the chair across from the desk. "I'm not here to apologize, Ethan. I know that would be pointless. And I'm not here out of regret. I came because something is about to go public, and I thought you deserved to hear it from me first." He remained standing, steady, arms crossed. "Talk." She pulled an envelope from her bag and placed it on the table. "My name is going to appear in an investigation tied to irregular contracts from the time I was working with that European group. I'm not guilty, but they'll drag me through the mud, and inevitably your name will come up too. They'll dig into what happened between us and twist it." Isabella stayed silent, but her mind was already connecting the dots. Helena was the woman Ethan had buried, the woman who had made him stop believing in love. And now she was here, bringing a shadow from the past as effortlessly as handing over a piece of paper. Ethan picked up the envelope but didn't open it. "So did you come here to warn me, or to protect yourself?" Helena looked at him without flinching. to give you the right to know before it blows up, and maybe to close a chapter. Ethan turned away, walking to the window. The silence between the three of them weighed heavy. 20 years ago you left without a word, he said, still facing the glass. You disappeared from my life and took everything with you. You left no room for questions, and now you show up with answers I never asked for. Helena looked down. I was young, scared, and stupid. And I was a man about to propose to you. The revelation filled the air. Isabella looked away. She didn't want to hear more. But she didn't want to leave either. Helena stood. I just wanted you to know, that's all. She looked at Isabella once more, this time with a clearer expression. Assessment. Then, without another word, she walked out. The silence lingered for long minutes. Ethan remained at the window. Isabella quietly gathered the documents one by one, trying to keep her breathing steady. So, it was because of her? He turned slowly. He knew what she meant. Yes. She nodded. No drama, no accusation. Makes sense. It does? When someone breaks you like that, you learn to keep the world at arm's length. He studied her steadiness. The absence of judgment. It disarmed him more than any confrontation could. I never told anyone, not even Amanda. I'm not Amanda. He walked back to the table and sat down. You think she's telling the truth? I think she came out of fear. And when a woman like that is afraid, it's because the damage has already begun. He said nothing, turning her words over in his mind. Isabella slid the last of the papers into her folder. Do you need some time? No. He met her gaze with calm intensity. This doesn't change anything. The project moves forward. We move forward. She crossed her arms. And what about what you feel for her? I don't feel anything anymore, but that doesn't mean she didn't leave a mark. She nodded. There was something in the air. Not romance, not resentment. A raw connection. Real. Two people looking at each other as if they saw the wreckage and stayed anyway. Later, the building was nearly empty when Isabella returned to retrieve a forgotten file. As she passed Ethan's office, she saw the light still on. She stopped. He was there, sitting, staring at the still unopened envelope. She knocked twice. May I? He looked up. Of course. She walked in, stepped up to the desk. You haven't opened it? I'm not sure I want to know. She pulled a chair up beside him, sat down. They were side by side now, not face to face. The posture was less formal, more human. Sometimes knowing doesn't change anything, but it also doesn't stop. Stop what? She looked at him. From moving on. He watched her for a long moment, then picked up the envelope and dropped it in the trash without opening it. Then let's move on. Together? Together. And for the first time, she didn't answer right away. But she stayed, and that said more than any word ever could. The car is waiting downstairs, Mr. Blackwood. The assistant's voice broke the heavy silence of the conference room. Ethan looked up from his tablet, tapped the screen to close it, and nodded. Tell Isabella we're leaving in 15 minutes, and make sure the printed contracts are brought along. The trip to Italy to finalize the deal with the European sustainable battery supplier was a strategic move for the division. But Ethan knew Isabella's presence wasn't just protocol. Since Helena's visit, something had shifted between them. There were no declarations, no grand gestures, but the way they looked at each other, the way they listened, everything had changed. The plane cruised smoothly above the clouds, as if time outside no longer mattered. Inside the executive cabin, there were only two people, Ethan and Isabella. She was reading documents, highlighter in hand. He pretended to review reports, but his eyes kept drifting back to her. Are you always this quiet before a negotiation? She asked without looking up. No, only when the other party intrigues me more than the numbers. She lifted her eyes. The silence that followed weighed heavier than the altitude outside could explain. Was that a charm attempt, Mr. Blackwood? It was a fact, but if you'd like to take it as charm, I won't object. She smiled. Rarely. A small but genuine smile. The first in days. Careful, You might convince me you're more than steel and control. And if I am, she slowly closed the folder, then maybe I'll lower my guard for a few minutes. Their eyes locked for too long. Long enough for both to realize they were on new ground, unstable ground, but for the first time neither backed away. The night in Milan was made of golden lights, soft sounds, and rich aromas. The restaurant was on the terrace of a classic hotel. The negotiation had ended hours earlier, successfully. The dinner was just a pretext. Isabella wore a discreet black dress, elegant, tailored to match her strong presence. Ethan, in his usual understated style, dark suit, open collar, classic watch on his wrist. But something about him was different, lighter. "I thought you were the type to avoid dinners after deals," she said, as they accepted the wine. "I am, but you're a consistent exception." She raised her glass. They toasted silently. The delicate clink of crystal echoed briefly. "I've changed since Helena showed up," she said between sips. "Not in a bad way, just slowed down a little. You notice that?" "I notice everything, remember?" He nodded. The waiter brought their plates, but neither was really interested in the food. "Do you want to know why I proposed to her?" Ethan asked suddenly. "Only if you want to tell me." "Because for a while, I thought love was enough. And when she left, I realized it's not always." Isabella watched him carefully, not like someone analyzing, like someone truly listening. "And now, do you think it is? Now?" He took a deep breath. "Now I know love is just the beginning. The rest is built with honesty and with someone who can look you in the eye when you're at your worst." A soft breeze moved Isabella's hair. She didn't look away. "You're good with words, Ethan." "No, I'm good with silence. But with you, words seem to make more sense." She laughed quietly. Her laugh was rare, and all the more beautiful because of it. Hours later, the city was asleep. The hotel was silent, the executive floor hallway dimly lit. Isabella stepped off the elevator, the soft sound of her heels against the carpet the only noise, when she heard the door next to hers open. Ethan. He had just come up as well. They stood face to face, just a few steps apart. She held her purse against her body. He had his hands in his coat pockets. "It was a good night," she said with a faint smile. "It was. We can pretend that's all it was." He took a step forward. "Do you want to pretend?" "No, but sometimes it's easier." Another step. They were close now. The silence between them wasn't empty, it was charged. "And since when do you choose the easier path?" She exhaled slowly, her eyes locked on his. "Since I started feeling like this path could break me if I don't know where I'm stepping." Ethan lifted a hand slowly, touched her face with his fingertips, a soft touch, as if asking permission. She didn't pull away. "Isabella," he whispered, "say it. I don't know what this is, but it's real." She leaned her forehead against his, her heart racing, every cell in her body alert. "I know." Then he kissed her. It wasn't rushed. It was firm, sure, but unhurried. The kind of kiss that knew its own weight. Not just desire, but history. She responded with the same quiet intensity, her hands on his shoulders, her body surrendering what her mind still tried to resist. When they pulled apart, her eyes were glassy. Not from sadness, but from everything that moment meant. "Good night, Ethan." She stepped into her room without looking back. He stood there for a few seconds, unmoving, feeling for the first time in years the impact of something he couldn't control. And, strangely, he didn't want to. The sharp click of the door closing behind her was the last thing Isabella heard before letting herself sink into the armchair in her hotel room. The dress still clung slightly to her skin from the heat of the Milanese night, but she didn't bother changing. She brought her hands to her face, took a deep breath, and only then allowed the silence of the early morning to flood the thoughts that wouldn't stop. The kiss was still with her. The touch. His breath. The way Ethan's fingers had brushed her face like he was touching something precious and at the same time dangerous. She knew it hadn't been a careless gesture. He wasn't an impulsive man. Ethan Blackwood didn't do anything that hadn't been measured first. and that made it all the more real, and all the more complicated. She closed her eyes. This wasn't just desire. It wasn't just proximity forced by work. Something was being built inch by inch between two people who had sworn to themselves not to feel anything anymore. And for that very reason, he disappeared. 3 days. 3 days with no messages, no calls, no joint meetings. The return to New York had been silent, direct, professional. Ethan hadn't spoken about what happened. Isabella, too proud to ask, kept herself busy with the team and project adjustments, as if nothing had changed. But it had, and everyone noticed. Amanda watched from a distance with the quiet precision of someone who could read a room without needing words. The engineers were cautious, asking discreetly if the CEO would return to the technical meetings. Isabella only replied that he would, even if she didn't believe it much herself. Then on the 4th day, the email came from Ethan Blackwood to Isabella Hart. Subject, Strategic Position Review. Isabella, I've decided to focus the final structural adjustments with the Central HQ team. During this period, you'll lead the division's operations unit as acting director. I trust your leadership. I'll be away for an indefinite period. She read the message 3 times. Every word felt calculated, impersonal, neutral, but she knew Ethan. Knew him well enough to recognize this as an escape, a retreat. The man who had kissed her in Milan with strength and surrender was now burying it all under layers of silence and control. Again. So you're just going to let him hide behind an email? Amanda didn't hold back as she adjusted some folders in the executive office. Isabella looked at her, her eyes darker than usual. The fatigue of the past few days was beginning to show. He's the CEO. I'm a partner, but not his wife, not his girlfriend. He has the right to step away. And the right to be a coward. Amanda raised an eyebrow, snapping the folder shut. Because that's what he's being. He's been broken once. Maybe he thinks letting go now is opening the door to falling again. Amanda leaned forward on the desk. And you're going to let him get lost in that? Isabella didn't answer, because deep down, she didn't know. Ethan's absence changed the company's rhythm. Surprisingly, not for the worse. Isabella stepped up decisively, led meetings, accelerated testing, restructured problem areas. The HQ team started referring to her as the woman who doesn't wait for orders. The division began growing more efficiently. Within 2 weeks, the results were clear. But his absence still hung in the air like a ghost. In a board meeting, one of the investors, Marcus Caldwell, ambitious and always politely political, made a subtle comment. It's interesting to see the division running more efficiently without Mr. Blackwood's constant presence. Perhaps we should reconsider the shared leadership model. Isabella set her pen down on the table slowly. Marcus, if you think efficiency means absence, then maybe you're looking at the numbers through the wrong lens. Ethan may not be here, but the structure enabling this operation is his. The vision is his. And for your information, leadership was never shared. I'm acting temporarily, and I'm doing it because he trusted me. Her tone was direct, crisp, but not rude. Marcus tried to smile, flustered. Just an observation, of course. She simply resumed taking notes. Message delivered. That night, Isabella left the office late. The city was wrapped in a soft, steady rain. Inside the car, the sound of water on the windshield seemed louder than usual. The driver kept the radio off. She stared out the window, her thoughts racing. Power, independence, recognition. Everything she had always wanted was happening. For the first time, she was seen not as a promise, but as reality. She was leading one of Blackwood's boldest projects. She was respected. She was in control, and still something was missing. Ethan wasn't the kind of man to back away out of fear. Not after everything. Something had broken in him. Again. Maybe because he was starting to feel more than he wanted to admit. Maybe because for him, love still equaled pain. The next morning, Isabella entered the conference room with the quarterly reports in hand. She was ready to present the results to the board. She wore a light grey blazer, her hair up in a tight bun, her gaze unwavering. Just as she began to speak, the door opened. Ethan walked in. The room went silent. A few people stood automatically. He raised a hand, signaling for them to remain seated. He wore a dark, immaculate suit, thinner, more serious, but still the same man. Isabella didn't pause the presentation. She finished each point, each chart, each argument with surgical precision, then handed the discussion over to the board. When it was done, he was the first to applaud. Slowly. Then the others followed. She looked at him, and for the first time in weeks he looked back, truly looked. "Excellent leadership," he said after the meeting. "Better than I would have done." She nodded. "Thank you." They stood in silence for a few seconds. Then he spoke. "Can we talk? Privately?" She hesitated for a moment, then nodded. They left the room together. And for the first time since Milan, there was no distance between them. But a choice was waiting, and her time to make it was running out. "You avoided me for weeks, Ethan, and now you want to talk, today of all days?" The words came out of Isabella's mouth with firmness, but without raising her voice. She stood with her arms crossed in the executive private office. The glass walls around them reflected the city outside, but the real movement was happening inside, between them. Ethan, standing across from her, didn't look away. His expression was serious, but not cold. His eyes held something different, a discomfort, a restlessness. "Yes, today," he said, "because I can't keep pretending everything's fine. Not professionally, not between us. I'm not pretending anything. I kept working, delivering results, while you disappeared. From me, from us." He took a deep breath, stepped back a few paces, hands in his pockets. "I didn't disappear because I was afraid of you, Isabella. I stepped back because I felt something I haven't felt in over 20 years. And it shook me. And you thought the best response was to ghost me? Turn me into a substitute for a pain that wasn't even mine?" He turned, his gaze steady. "No. I thought that if I kept getting closer, I'd end up ruining everything again. I know what love does to me. I lost control once. I can't go through that again." "And you think I don't know what that's like?" She stepped forward. "You think I didn't build my own armor because I've been broken too? The difference is, I don't run. I face it." They locked eyes, the air between them charged. It was a battle without shouting, but filled with truth. "You challenge me, Isabella. You push me, you pull me out of alignment, and I hate losing control. But when I'm with you, I'm not the same man." "And who said you have to be?" She paused, took a breath. "Maybe that's the problem, Ethan. You still want to be the man who runs the world without letting anyone in. But I don't want a CEO by my side. I want a man." He was quiet for a moment, then walked to the window, staring out at the city below. "When Helena left me, I lost more than love. I lost trust in myself. I thought I'd never be enough for anyone again. So I built this empire, put on this armor, and it worked." He turned to face her. "But then you showed up and tore it all down with a few words and a look." Isabella stepped closer. "I'm not here to tear you down, Ethan. I want to stand beside you, but I won't beg for space in your life. Not to stay, not to leave." His eyes glistened for the first time, with something he always tried to hide, vulnerability. "I know." He pulled his hands from his pockets. "And that's why I'm here, to do what I should have done before." She looked at him. No anger, no forced sweetness, just waiting. "I choose you, Isabella, with everything that comes with it, with what scares me, with what changes me. If you still want this, I'm here." Silence. She stepped forward, then again, close enough that he could feel her breath. "You don't have to be perfect. You just can't be a coward." "I'm not." "Then prove it." And this time she kissed him. A deep, steady kiss. Not rushed, not fearful. The kiss of two people who had hidden for far too long and now knew exactly what they were choosing. When they pulled apart, her eyes were calmer, his finally disarmed. "Does this mean you forgive me?" he asked. "There's no forgiveness where there's no blame, just wrong choices." She gave a small smile and added, "Now we choose right." And for the first time in years, Ethan Blackwood wasn't the CEO. He was just a man, standing before the only woman who had, effortlessly, crossed every wall he'd ever built, and he was ready to never let her go. The press is already gathering in the lobby, and the board is in the main conference room. Amanda entered the room with a tablet in hand, her eyes scanning every detail of the space. Isabella stood before the mirror, subtly adjusting the collar of the white shirt beneath her light beige blazer. Her reflection was composed, but her gaze held more than focus. It held history. "And him?" she asked, not taking her eyes off the mirror. "He arrived 10 minutes ago. He's speaking with the directors. He's different." Isabella gave a faint smile. "He's alive." Amanda closed the tablet, stepping back toward the door. The press is going to have a lot to say today, but at least this time it'll be true. The Blackwood Enterprises auditorium was packed. Cameras were in place, reporters whispered among themselves, and flashes flickered non-stop. Today was the official launch of the company's new division, the Clean Energy and Innovation project that had been quietly developed over the past several months. And now it was ready. But what no one expected was what would happen inside that room. Ethan walked in first, wearing a charcoal suit, posture straight, expression serious, but with a quiet glint in his eyes. He walked to the center of the stage with the calm of a man who knew exactly where he stood. At his side, Isabella appeared, wearing the shade of strength that defined her. The two stood side by side. No ego, no competition. They were partners, and it showed. He was the first to speak. "For 20 years, I built this empire on control, strategy, and results. Blackwood Enterprises became a benchmark for efficiency, but the world is changing. And to keep up with that change, I had to change first." There was a slight stir in the audience, but he continued unwavering. "The new division we present today is not just a project. It's proof that innovation doesn't come from fear or rigidity. It comes from the courage to listen, to share, to trust. And the woman beside me, she's the one who reminded me of that." Isabella kept her eyes on the audience, but her breathing was slow, controlled. She knew the weight of those words, knew what they had cost him. Then she took the microphone. "The future isn't built alone. It's shaped by different hands, opposing visions, and above all, emotional courage. What we're launching here today is not just a sustainable energy model, it's a new kind of leadership, one that includes, one that embraces conflict as part of growth, and one that values walking beside someone, not ahead of them." The applause began slowly, then spread throughout the room. They didn't smile right away. This wasn't a celebration, it was a declaration, and in that declaration was a story the public would never fully know. Hours later, the room had emptied out. The press was gone. Board members chatted in small groups. Isabella walked toward the rooftop garden on the 38th floor, seeking a moment of quiet. Ethan was already there. "I thought you'd still be giving interviews," she said as she approached. "I snuck out through the service stairs. I can't take another reporter." She smiled, leaning against the glass railing. "I should be exhausted, but I'm not. Because today we did more than launch something." "I know." He turned to face her. "I was waiting for the right moment to say this, but I've realized there is no right moment. Just the choice not to let it pass." She looked at him with quiet curiosity. "What are you trying to say?" "I love you, Isabella." He said it plainly, without flourish, without fear, without trying to sound too certain. She blinked slowly, felt the breath catch in her chest, and then, with the ease of someone who had waited a long time to hear it, she replied, "I love you too, Ethan." He stepped closer, took her hand. They stood there for a few moments, simply looking out at the city pulsing below. It was a new chapter, for the company, for the world, for them. "And now?" she asked with a smile. "Now we live, one day at a time." She rested her head on his shoulder. "That's more than enough." And just like that, no grand promises, no forced endings, only a new beginning. When love decides to return, it comes back different, stronger, wiser, truer. If this story touched you, share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear what it meant to you. Remember to hit the like and subscribe buttons. This is really important for the channel. Really important. And if you're ready for another story of love and hope, click the first card or the second one to watch the full playlist. See you there.